Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome to the Daily Crow. Of course, as always, I'm your host, Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show. It is Wednesday, November the 22nd here on TDC. And again, I appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We have got a jam-packed show for you. In case you missed it, this is the final show of this week with Thanksgiving tomorrow, more Thanksgiving festivities taking place on Friday. So we're breaking everything down. South Carolina, Clemson, my full preview, prediction, all that good stuff. We're going to lock that all in today. Also, guys, we are double dipping on our special guests. Both Chris Marler and Marc Ryan will join the show today. Chris Marler kicking us off here in a couple minutes. Marc Ryan later in our second hour. And yes, at the end of the show, we'll take some questions, some comments, some voicemails as well. Again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. If you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live and when we drop new video content as well. Also, those who want to check us out via podcast, make sure you head over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We're at the Spurs Up Show there. Hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review, by the way. 5-star review. It helps boost the show and helps other people find the show as well. And also be sure to follow us across all social media platforms, X, Facebook, Instagram. We're on TikTok doing a thing. You already know the drill there. Guys, really, really excited to chat with you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I see Bruce, Billy Cotton, Cameron, Austin, Gregory, Brendan M., Ethan K., Madison Duncan. The entire crew is here. And by the way, let me be the first to wish you a happy early Thanksgiving to you and yours. Happy Black Friday. Guys, stay tuned, by the way. Black Friday and Cyber Monday sale coming at tsus.store. So be sure to check that out, guys. We'll probably run like a 20 or 25% off sale through the weekend. So you're definitely going to want to take advantage of that. Guys, also, let me give you a quick content update here. No show tomorrow, Friday, of course. So we got Marc Ryan on today. We will be dropping our conversation with Jake Crane on Friday. Actually just got done chatting with Jake today. So we're actually going to release that at the noon slot on Friday. So you guys can watch that in a premiere on YouTube, just like you normally would watch TDC. That'll release via podcast version as well on Friday. So we've got all of our special guests in here. We're getting all of our content in. Also got a special guest convo dropping tomorrow that I think both Gamecock and Clemson fans are going to find very entertaining and very interesting as well. Stay tuned for that. Got a couple Clemson shows coming out this week that I actually jumped on their platform. I'm talking with our friends over at Nachos and Analysis later today. Had a conversation with the guys over at the 1009 podcast last night. So again, a lot of fun, guys. The content truly this week bleeding out of the eyeballs as we get ready for rivalry weekend, beginning tomorrow, actually, with the Egg Bowl tomorrow night. Then on Friday, we've got Missouri and Arkansas. We got Oregon State late Friday night, right? We got Iowa and Nebraska on Friday for you sickos out there who want to take the under like me. And then Saturday, a full day of games. Also NFL tomorrow. It's going to be a really, really, really fun weekend. So again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in here on this hump day. Thank you all so much for the continued love and support. Again, guys, do not forget later in the show, we are talking full preview of South Carolina Clemson, top storylines, and I will lock in my prediction for Saturday's game as well. So a really fun, exciting day, guys. That being said, we're going to go ahead and get him into our normal Wednesday guest who joins us via iPhone. And I know that he's probably really worried about his camera angles and the zoom ins. We don't care, though. We're just happy to hear his voice and see his face, man. Our good friend Chris Marler, Saturday down south. Chris, what's going on, my man? You look great, by the way. Let me be the first one to say that.
Yeah, no, I am like in a nightmare scenario over here with technology because I'm dog sitting for the parents over here in Lexington, South Carolina. Came down the road, got my whole setup and everything, good to go. So I didn't miss miss a beat with work and stuff like that, because it's like a very busy time for us. And they're gonna be gone for 3 weeks, bro. I'm telling you, like within hours of leaving, something goes wrong with the Wi-Fi, and I'm just sitting here having like to run my entire life a hotspot. So it's been a stressful couple of days just because of all the shows we got to do and TV and all that kind of shit. So, but good to be here, man. I'm excited. This is like I've given Beamer a lot of shit this year, but I'm very excited to be pulling for South Carolina, knowing that he's not the worst person that's gonna be in this post game pressers in that stadium.
I would imagine both guys, both Shane Bieber and Dabo Swinney, will try to one-up each other at some point. Chris, let's go there first, by the way, because you mentioned, obviously, everybody knows at this point you live in the state of South Carolina now. What's it been like for you being in the state? Have you had any experiences where you stopped and you were like, man, I mean, you come from the Alabama-Auburn side of things. You know what a big rivalry is like, that's for sure. But have you had any experience where you're like, man, Carolina-Clemson really is like a pure hatred? Or, I mean, what's been the experience, I guess, even just this week being in the state of South Carolina and around this rivalry?
Well, I'm looking outside right now and I see all the trees in my neighborhood are still up and thriving. So you guys aren't batshit crazy like Bama fans, at least. That part of the But no, I'll say, I mean, like I've lived in the state for off and on for a while, and my family lives here, and like it is cool this week because it is something that divides the state. Like you are Carolina, you're Clemson, you're not a Citadel fan. Like nobody really gives a shit about College Charleston, all that kind of stuff. And it's always fun to see like that kind of like house divided mentality for the entire state. I've really enjoyed this year because I think that like if you want to say something about Carolina fans, I give Carolina fans a hard time sometimes. And real quick, shout out to Austin Gregory for the comment on Twitter. I appreciate your support. I've been in the trenches on Twitter this week with Auburn fans and no, but no, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about like South Carolina fans is like they do have a little bit of Auburn in them, which is like doesn't matter what happened last year. You know, they went 0-11 that one year, right? I'm dating myself. They went 0-11. Some of y'all are probably too early or young to remember this. But when they went 0-11, they wore it like a badge of honor. Like we sold out every game. Like South Carolina, you're not going to keep South Carolina fans down. And watching them get to a point of the season where they're like, dude, we might be able to get to a bowl and have two wins at the end of the year at home in that stadium. Two really cool like things happening with the atmosphere wise. You have like Darude last week or Darude or whatever you called him that one time. Darude, and then you have Trump. Like former president's going to be in attendance for your game. And then you go to Clemson. You look at Clemson fans, and they are so uncomfortable in this skin that they don't know how to handle it. They just don't know how to handle it because they're so used to being like this dominant force, and they're not. And I think they're walking into a fucking hornet's nest. Excuse my language. I think they're walking into a fucking hornet's nest on Saturday.
Chris, to your point, by the way, just a quick side note about the whole Donald Trump attending the game thing. It's very random and somewhat funny, but the funniest comment I heard was from a South Carolina fan. I don't care where you fall, what political side. This is funny. He said, the last thing we need is more orange in the stadium. And I laughed. Admittedly, I laughed. So I don't care what side you're on. That's funny, in my opinion.
Right.
So either way, looking back and looking ahead, too, nobody, I'm sure, was more nobody. No, go ahead.
I just have this vision in my head of like say what you want to about politics and the Trump thing, but thank God it's Trump going and not Biden, because can you imagine Biden find his way out of that fucking traffic on the way out of William Price? Can you imagine him trying to navigate down, like there's no way he pronounces UG Street right, for one, but him trying to get traffic would be a nightmare. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, would not be good. I would imagine he would not be driving, which would be best for all parties involved. I'm sure there was nobody more tickled, by the way, by the results, Auburn, New Mexico State, than you. How does that affect your outlook, if at all, for the Iron Bowl this weekend? I mean, Bama's a 14.5-point favorite. Weird things happen at Jordan-Hare. That might be the most overused phrase in the history of the world. I mean, I'm not taking away from the fact that upsets happen there. But did you think it was going to be a bloodbath either way? Do you think it makes Auburn more dangerous somehow? Like your overall view of Bama-Auburn this weekend?
Yeah, I don't really have, like, I don't think it, I mean, it's funny as shit that it happened. It was hilarious. you're a 25-point favorite against a good team. Like New Mexico State's not a bad team, but you're a 25-point favorite and you lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And here's the thing. It wasn't like Auburn winning that game. It was like, oh, man, we had 3 turnovers. We fumbled a punt inside of our 10 or a kickoff or whatever. It was like you got doubled up on yardage. You got doubled up on first downs. You got your ass kicked. Like, you just got your ass kicked. That being said, I would put any amount of money on the fact that Bama probably doesn't beat them by 21 and probably doesn't score 31 points against Auburn. It's just not the way this rivalry works out. Now, I think for Auburn, in the way I view this is the way I viewed like getting into slumps when I played baseball, which is like you could go to the cage and you can get up early and get extra swings in and you blah, blah, blah. But sometimes what you end up doing is just you and some of the guys go out after a doubleheader. Maybe you went over somehow in the doubleheader and you just go get rip-roaring drunk and you just come in all loosey-goosey the next day and like, you know what? Whatever happens, happens, and you bust out of that slump. I think that's the mindset Auburn has to have in that game because it's like diving into that game is not going to do them any good with 1 game left in the year, right? They kind of know what they are at this point. It's an embarrassing loss, but just like throw it away and move on. There's a path for them to win, but like I'm so over hearing about Jordan Hare. Yes, crazy things happen there. The kick 6 was crazy because it happened there. They were also the 4th ranked team in the country, right? Like the 2017 game, it's the 6th ranked team in the country. That 2019 caught a lot of breaks. Also had a backup quarterback that threw 2 pick 6s for Alabama. I just don't see that happening. Like I don't see that happening. And I know what happened in 2021, and I just don't see any of that happening. Actually, now that I think about it, I just gave you several examples all from the last decade of being in Jordan Hare. So maybe it is a house of horrors. I do think that going into the game, Bama is going to have to be they're going to have to not be more than -2 in the turnovers, and in the way that Auburn's going to win this game is they're going to need at least multiple big plays, like Jarquez Hunter, somebody loses contain and he breaks one for 60 or 70 yards, and they score. Like it'll take multiple turnovers inside their own territory and stuff like that. Because I just don't see how they're going to slow down Bama for that long. And more than anything, I don't see how they're going to put up points against that Bama defense.
Chris, your thoughts on Auburn selling commemorative cups for the kick 6 10 years later at the game Saturday?
Well, my first thought is that I offered somebody $100 to get one for my girlfriend so I can get one for Christmas. Auburn grad. I told her about it last night. And I was like, awesome. Fucking awesome. If anybody wants one of those, I might have one for you. No, I think that I get it. I get it. And I think that if I'm being self-aware and honest, like I'm sure part of the reason I get so annoyed with it is because it came at the expense of my team. But like, okay, like how long? Like it's their whole fucking identity. And listen, I'll definitely be honest about this. I have a ton of Auburn fans that I'm friends with. I think it's a better fan base than Bama. But the whole thing about how it's not because of the play, it's because of Rod Bramblett. I don't even believe that. I think it's great. Rod Bramblett is an incredible legend in SEC media history and broadcasting history. And that call is fantastic for Auburn fans. And it's the greatest play in college football history. But Jesus Christ, guys, like it's every single, it's not even just November. It's their whole identity for like 1 week out of the year in July for some reason. Like I'm just, we get it. It happened. And it took a miracle for you to not win the national championship. Like it took a miracle for you to get to the national championship where you played Mizzou in the SEC championship before then. And then you blew a 21-point lead in the Natty. Congrats on second place, guys. It's awesome. They are the Confederacy of, I'm not going to say that. Don't fucking clip that either. Don't clip that.
For those, Chris, that don't understand the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, that have not grown up with it, been around it, what makes it so special? What makes it a rivalry that most consider as one of the best, if not the best rivalry in college football? What is it about that rivalry?
I mean, they really do hate each other. They do. There's this, I think the two sides, when you look at it, it's almost like a white collar, blue collar thing, but you all came from the same school, right? Like the same, I mean, state, like Auburn love to look down their nose at Bama because of like the sidewalk alumni and you didn't go there and blah, blah, blah. And like Auburn is like this prestigious university, and like Auburn's a nice campus. It's a pasture. It's a pasture with some steeples and nice. It's a nice feel to it, but like, you know, like I've said this before, like I've watched Bama win more national championships in a fucking Olympiad than Auburn has won in their entire existence of a program. So it's like, I get that it's great that you guys believe in Auburn and you love it and all that kind of stuff. But for Bama, it's like, it's very much this idea of what they've had for decades now, which is everyone in the country thinks this state is stupid. Everyone in the country, including me, everyone in the country looks down on us about the education, the obesity, or like just the way, the backwards way of life or whatever. But one thing we're really good at is football. And I think that is a point of pride in that state. And it's definitely a point of pride for Bama fans. And I think that, like, you kind of look at it in this terms of the two sides almost try to bully each other into like, well, at least we went to school there. I was like, oh, at least we won a bunch of titles. And I mean, they had to stop playing this game for 50 years, dude. Or like 40 years because of all of like the stabbings and beatings and fights and all the stuff that happened after the games. Like they didn't pick it back up until 1948. So I think there's just so much of a big brother, little brother mentality, which goes for a lot of rivalries, but especially this one, when you consider stuff like, Bama, they played this game in Birmingham every year, and that's where Bama was playing their biggest home games for decades. And so it's like, there's just this perpetual chip on the shoulder of really both sides. And I think they really just hate each other.
Chris, speaking of another game where the fan bases hate each other, South Carolina, Clemson, we'll talk about this one. Both of these teams have won 3 in a row. Gamecocks are a win away from a bowl game. What's really fun about this one, Chris, for the first time in a while, it feels like going into this one that both fan bases are on edge. Both of these teams, neither program has had the season they wanted, and it really does come down to the rivalry game to take some of that sting out of the season that was, and not necessarily spin it that the season was a success, but at least be able to look back on it favorably. You look at this ball game, of course, South Carolina coming off that win against Kentucky, that slugfest. Clemson just beat UNC, beat Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. Turnovers have been a problem for the Tigers. The Gamecocks of late have been able to get the ball off of people. Spencer Rattler's last home game, we presume. How do you see this one playing out, man? I mean, the spread's at 7. It feels like a bit of a coin flip game, and it should be a fun one.
I like shot up out of bed last night when I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw your tweet about how Spencer Rattler has another year of eligibility. I was like, what is happening? It's like people talk about college like for like my whole life, like, hey man, enjoy it while you can. It'll go by fast, and then you're like, Jesus Christ, Spencer, Stetson, all these MFs just out here like going like the 7-year plan. It is not going by fast. Spencer Rattler, his last game, I think this is a statement game for him. A guy that like you saw the seesaw on the roller coaster that he took everyone on last year. I missed that game because I was at I forgot where I was, but I was at some game, so I didn't get to see the South Carolina Clemson game last year. I watched it this summer and live tweeted it. It was awesome. It was like an incredible game. But he did. I thought it was one of these games too, like from like just hearing about it, that he must have just been lights out, and he wasn't. He was, he made some mistakes. I think that you're going to see a very clean game from Spencer Rattler. I think you're going to see some fun out of Shane Beamer. I don't think that, like you said this earlier, I don't think South Carolina is scared of Clemson. And I think Clemson kind of thrives off that whole idea that, like, we're big bad Clemson and we're going to come in here and we're going to do what we always do. And we run this state, like that type of shit. Like, listen, I'm old enough to remember, like, Spurrier putting 5 in a row on these dudes and then bragging about it at a Kenny Chesney concert at the Colonial Life Center or whatever it was in like 2008 or I don't know. I like South Carolina at home. I love what Austin Gregory said. Clemson is 1-3 in games on the road. The attendance in those games, like, it's nowhere near the environment they're going to walk into in South Carolina. And I've watched Clemson a decent year, and they've had some good wins, right? Like they've beaten a few good teams. Got manhandled on the scoreboard against Duke. You lost at home to Florida State because you like pissed down your leg, basically. I don't think this team, to be honest, and I hate to say this, like, there's no Clemson fans here, so I don't really care. I don't think Clemson's man enough to win this game. I just don't. I don't think Clemson is good enough in the trenches, I don't think Clemson is good enough. Like from a physicality standpoint, I think they are for sure. But I think when you start looking at some of the stuff that they're going to have to do to win this game for 60 fucking minutes, I don't think they're going to be good enough to do it. And I think South Carolina, like I said, man, I think Clemson walks into a fucking hornet's nest on Saturday. Williams-Brice will be absolutely rocking. And I think Carolina wins. 7-point underdog? Fucking bet my parents' house that I'm in right now for Thanksgiving that they cover that.
It's always a lot of fun when you're betting somebody else's house, Chris, for sure. No, when it opened, I admittedly, when it opened at 9, I was surprised. Opened at 9 on Circa Sports. I was surprised it was at that high. So the rest of the slate, the rest of the SEC slate, Chris, is there anything that jumps out to you? What SEC rivalry game are you intrigued by? I mean, I think Missouri, there's a couple spreads that are a little bit closer than I'd expect. And I think it's because of that unpredictability on rivalry weekend. Like Mizzou, Arkansas is a really interesting one. How did the Razorbacks respond to, hey, Sam Pittman's coming back next year? We can talk about that if you like. The Egg Bowl, I think, is a super underrated rivalry. I don't know how competitive it's going to be, but it's real, true, nasty hate. The backup quarterback bowl with FSU, Florida. What stands out to you on the SEC slate on rivalry weekend?
Yeah, if you're a Bama fan like me, you kind of want Florida to beat Florida State, maybe. You want Florida State out of the way. And even though they dropped in the polls last night, I still think an undefeated Florida State team wins. A lot of interesting lines, like you said. I think the 3 games that stand out the most is Florida State, and that being 7-point line, quarterbacks. The other being Mizzou and Arkansas. That only opens at 9. It's down to 7 because Mizzou's got about 4 starters that are probably going to be out for that game, 2 linebackers especially. And then you look at the Ole Miss game, 10 points is not enough. Ole Miss is that's the game I'm looking forward to most because I love just waking up from like a tryptophan-induced coma and arguing with my family about what a souffle is and waking up watching the Egg Bowl. And I think that game is one of the most underrated rivalries in all of college football. It's probably like, I think it's the most underrated, hate-filled rivalry in all of college football, for real. And I think that the 10-point spread, Ole Miss has averaged 21 points less per game on the road this year than they have in games at home. But here's the thing. Ole Miss has a chance to do something they've rarely done in program history. That's get to 10 wins. And they have a chance to do it for the second time in 3 seasons under Lane Kiffin. And I just think that if you told Ole Miss fans at the beginning of the season, hey, listen, we're going to go 10-2, and the only 2 losses we're going to have are to Alabama and Georgia, any of them would have taken that. And I think that is a massive, massive win for that program if they're able to do that. So I think Ole Miss wins. I think they win big. I think it's a statement game. I think it's a statement game because Mississippi State's in a very vulnerable position. I know they get Will Rogers back, but he's even not been great this year by his standards. Obviously, it's a different offense. But you're talking about an interim head coach. You're talking about a program that is just like, it kind of feels like hanging by a thread, just trying to get to the end of the season. And then you look at the other sideline, you've got a coach that has tons of weapons on offense and improving defense and really has a chance to put a stamp on the end of the season that would be, not only great for their program history, but like all the shit that's going on with Kiffin right now. I think this is a huge statement game for him. I think they win big.
Chris Marler of Saturday Down South. Chris, one last thing, and I'll get you out of here. I did mention Arkansas and Sam Pittman. They announced, of course, he will return in 2024. Your just thoughts on that, the future of the Arkansas program. Did you feel like that was the right move, wrong move? And, I mean, I'll ask you this, too. What do you think yearly expectations should be at a program like Arkansas? Because I feel like it's kind of like South Carolina where you've had tastes of success, but never anything really sustained, and it's only going to get tougher with the SEC expanding. So just thoughts on the overall Arkansas program with Pittman returning next year.
These 2 programs are almost mirror images at times, right? Like Arkansas, I think, has had way more of the dips than South Carolina has had, especially in the last 20 years. But you think about these 2 programs, when did they peak in the last 20 years? 2011, 2012, 2013 time? Like, I mean, like South Carolina had 11-win seasons in. Like, people forget how good 2012 Arkansas was. They really forget how good that team was. It went to a Sugar Bowl, or maybe it was 2011. I don't remember. But that's a program that, like, 2012 or 2011 especially, you had Bama and LSU, and that's all anyone talked about. But Arkansas was a top 5 team. So I think that, like, it's a program that has some pride, and they've got some of those early 60s national championships that seemingly every SEC West team apparently has. like all in the same year too. But like I think that with Sam Pittman, I've been a big proponent of this, and I don't care how it sounds, and I really, to quote Drake, know yourself, know your worth, guys. Like they're a 7-win or an 8-win program, and now you have Texas and Oklahoma coming in. Give Pittman a lifetime contract. I feel like I've said it on this show before. Like, give him a lifetime contract because it's a very special thing in this day and age of football when you get a head coach who matches the energy of the fan base about a university. And I think that's something that we don't give enough credit to Sam Pittman. You saw with Ed Orgeron at LSU. I don't think they're ever going to have that kind of success, especially having one of the greatest teams of all time. But that man loves the University of Arkansas, and he loves trying to build that program. This is a down year, and it sucks that it happened with KJ Jefferson in his senior year. But it's the first time he's had to name new coordinators. He swung and missed on that, especially on offense. Give this man a lifetime contract, and like not in a rude way, but you're Arkansas. Like you're a 7-win program. Like enjoy the 9-win year you have. I keep saying this over and over. The 9-win season they had in 2021 that people say like we're past that, shouldn't count as much anymore because it was 3 years ago. That 9-win season, you had more wins that season than you had in 2017 through 2019 combined. Fuck off. Like enjoy the wins, celebrate the wins, Arkansas. Who do you think you are? Lifetime contract.
Chris, last thing, is it stuffing or dressing?
I don't fucking care. Excuse my language. I don't. I don't
you know why I love that answer? You know why I love that answer? Because I feel pretty much the same way. It's just like as long as it tastes good, I don't give a damn what you want to call it. So,
all right, listen. Let me say something real quick before you.
Go ahead.
Kick me out of here. I just say, this is the first year I've done this every week through the season. Always, I know. Listen, like. Call a spade. I know that you're not the most loved person sometimes on the internet, just like I'm not. Always proud of everything you've been able to build. Very thankful to call you a friend in real life and not just on the internet. And also want to say thank you to all the people in the chat. It's always been like very fun. I picked up a few friends I think online with some.
And of course, we just lost Marler in the middle of that heartfelt speech. How fitting. How fitting. Going once, going twice. Okay. I think Chris's Wi-Fi just took a crap. Either that or mine did. Let's see. Okay. We should be good. Guys, we are going to jump into a quick break after I make sure that we are good. There we go. Okay. If you guys can hear me, see me, please let me know. That's unfortunate. Chris Marler, the Wi-Fi. Oh, let's see. I don't know what happened. Either way, guys, hey, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we dive into all things South Carolina, Clemson. The rivalry takes place once again at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday night. All that and more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Watch your Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, November the 22nd, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Just looking at the comments over the break, Keenan says that Lou Holtz went 2-7 against Clemson, was fortunate not to go 0-9. Keenan, he beat Clemson in 2001. What other game did South Carolina win against Clemson during his time there? I don't think that that statistic is correct, respectfully, Keenan, because they lost in 99, they lost in 2000, they won in 2001, they lost in 02, they lost in 03, they lost in 04, and his time was done. So check the numbers, but I don't think that is it. Either way, I just saw that and was like thinking to myself, thinking out loud of, hey, am I wrong? I don't know. Either way, guys, want to say thank you really quickly to our good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, the Saturday Football Uncensored, taking the time to chat. Unfortunately, his Wi-Fi cut out there at the end, but always really, really good stuff. Always really good stuff. Having Chris on the show. I know for many of you, Chris Marler is your favorite guest that joins us on the airwaves weekly, and I know he appreciates those comments, those kind words. And again, I really, truly do value that friendship with Chris Marler and that relationship that we've cultivated over the years. When it really started, when Chris Marler called me the bearded tomato after South Carolina's loss to North Carolina in 2019. Really good times. Guys, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. The countdown to kickoff continues. That being said, we got a big show today. Preview, prediction. We're going to go ahead and dive into this thing. South Carolina, Clemson. Need I say more? One of the best and most intense rivalries in all of college football adds another chapter on Saturday night as the Gamecocks and Tigers do battle under the lights at Williams-Brice Stadium. And these are my top storylines for South Carolina and Clemson. And guys, we start with this. This kind of feels like going in this game, especially for my old school Gamecock and Tiger fans out there. Doesn't this feel kind of like the days of old? Right? My fandom started for South Carolina, my college football fandom as a whole, end of 02, beginning of 03. That's when it really started to click, right? I think that, I had watched games as a youngster, but I didn't really understand what it meant or why it was important. End of 02, beginning of 03. That's when I became a diehard of South Carolina football and a lover of college football as a whole. And you think back to those matchups, guys, when both programs were sort of on equal footing, right? Both programs were sort of floating in that 5 to 6 win range, getting to 6 wins and getting to a bowl game. It was a really, really big deal, right? I recall, I'll never forget, guys, 2004, when South Carolina beat Arkansas, right? Savell Newton to Troy Williamson for the game-winning touchdown. And I will never forget Coach Simpson with a pick to seal that victory, by the way. That was South Carolina's 6th win of the year. I will never forget going to school that following Monday. I was in middle school, going to school that following Monday. And I had a bunch of Clemson buddies, bunch of Carolina buddies. We would all talk trash to each other, and it was a lot of fun. Going to school that Monday and just doing this. 6 wins, because that was such a big deal. Getting to a bowl game was such a big deal. That felt like winning the SEC championship at that time. Obviously, Steve Spurrier came in. He changed those expectations. He got South Carolina fans to expect much more than 6-6 and raise those expectations. But Clemson was in a similar boat, right? Where it's like, the way you looked at the season rested on that final game of the year. It rested on the rivalry game because neither program was championship caliber. Neither program was competing for titles. And this season specifically has that feel. Now, would I much rather both teams be 12-0, number 1 and 2 in an Ohio State-Michigan scenario? I think I would for the national relevance and the attention on the game. But there is a beauty to it where it's like neither teams had the season they wanted to have, right? Clemson nor South Carolina. And neither team, if they win this game, are going to go throw a parade and say the season was a massive success, right? There were still shortcomings and things that did not live up to expectation or live up to standard. But it's really the difference between the penthouse and the doghouse. It's really the difference between jubilation and, at least if nothing else, having bragging rights to fall back on, and for the loser, it's your worst nightmare. It is dejection. It is a demoralized feeling. It is having to live in a state of pure hell for the next 365 days. Both teams, quote unquote, successful season, or just being able to look back on this season and it be memorable in any sort of positive light, it rests on this game. Of course, you've got bowl eligibility on the line for South Carolina. And guys, I would argue this. I would argue the South Carolina-Clemson rivalry has the most juice it's had, the most excitement, the most anticipation since probably 2013. And the reason I say that is because, guys, for the longest time when Clemson was going to college ball playoffs and dominating this series and the spread was coming out, right, opening up at 24.5, and they were just dominating year after year after year, you didn't feel that excitement, guys. If you're truly honest with yourself, you didn't feel that excitement. You didn't feel that energy. You didn't feel that hope and that optimism. Even last year, the spread was 2 touchdowns, right? There was a almost sort of a delusional belief, right? I mean, I picked South Carolina to beat Clemson last year. There was a great hope because what had happened in that Tennessee game. But even then, Clemson was expected by most to win that football game. This is the first time, and I would argue a decade, where both fan bases come in a little bit on edge. Both fan bases are almost hesitant to talk their trash because in the back of their minds, they're thinking, man, is my team going to be able to cash a check that my mouth might write all week long talking trash to the other side? And I think that's something, guys, that's healthy for the rivalry. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it is going to be a really fun weekend. And it's like the rivalry's got that juice back where it all rests on this Saturday. Like to even remotely look back at the season as it's one that we even want to talk about. This game on Saturday, it means everything for each individual side. Guys, moving to the game, the matchup, one of the biggest storylines, guys, in this one, and it's so low-hanging fruit, I feel like, to talk about. What's your keys to the game? Well, I mean, turnover battle. You got to win the turnover margin. Like, that one's so no-duh, right? Nobody goes into a game and says, well, yeah, well, I mean, we could turn the ball over a couple times, lose the margin, +3, +4. We'll be fine. No big deal, right? Like, nobody's going to say that. But what's interesting about this one, Clemson's had a turnover problem all year long. Guys, Clemson has turned the football over at least once in every game this season. They haven't gone a game without coughing it up. 13 fumbles to their credit, one of the worst in college football. 20 total turnovers lost. That is tied for 111th in college football. Now, South Carolina has been abysmal for the most part defensively this season, but last couple weeks, 3-game winning streak, South Carolina's defense has started to make some plays. It even started in that Jacksonville State game where that game was ugly. The defense wasn't good, but Stone Blanton's pick 6 at the end of that game, some other turnovers happening as well. Gamecocks defense started to be opportunistic. Then you look at Vandy. Then you look at Kentucky. South Carolina, guys, has forced 10 turnovers in the last 3 weeks. I know 2 of those opponents are JSU and Vandy. I get that. Still, the Gamecocks defense is making plays. So, turnover margin. And guys, if you've watched this rivalry long enough, you know how big turnovers are. You know how costly they can be. When South Carolina was beating Clemson year after year after year, the Gamecocks had great teams, no doubt. But one of the things that happened on a yearly basis and why South Carolina was whipping Clemson like a rented mule, it was turnover margin. It was turnover battle. The Gamecocks were constantly. I mean, guys, you go back and think the last time South Carolina beat Clemson at Willie B, it was 2013. Gamecocks won the turnover margin in that game. I think it was like 4-1. So it is a very, very big deal. Clemson's been turning it over all year. Carolina starting to force some. How much of a factor does that play on Saturday night? Sticking with Carolina's defense, guys, it's no secret you got to stop Will Shipley, and Phil Maffa. I'm getting the names mixed up here. But that's where it starts and ends for the Gamecocks. If you can't win in the trenches and you can't get a push and you can't slow down that two-headed monster, that is Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, it's going to be a long night. You've got to make Clemson one-dimensional, similar to what you did in that game against Kentucky, where, Ray Davis had one big run. He popped off a couple, but Kentucky did not ride him the way I thought they would. He wasn't nearly as productive as some of us thought he would be. Now, Clemson's a much better version of what Kentucky does, right? Their offensive line's been somewhat questionable, somewhat inconsistent throughout this season. The Garrett Riley offense hasn't quite lived up to expectation and standard. But let's also point out, by the way, Clemson has won 3 games in a row. They're feeling much better about themselves. The quarterback play has been better. The offense has been better. But it all starts for South Carolina slowing down that running game of Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, especially Will Shipley, who has torched the South Carolina defense in his 2 years in this game. Physicality up front, that's what's going to win. What does South Carolina's front seven, what kind of answer do they have? And on that note, do we see the 3-3-5 stick around, right? So a lot of that in the Kentucky game, and the results have been better. The results were much better last week. Is South Carolina able to win that battle at the point of attack, and how do they contain that two-headed monster of Will Shipley and Phil Maffa? Because, guys, if you do that, and we're about to talk about him in a second, but if you do that, you ask any Gamecock fan out there, heck, you ask any Clemson fan out there, if South Carolina can slow down the running game of Clemson enough, and this thing turns into a 4-quarter quarterback battle between Spencer Rattler and Cade Klubnik, I don't know anybody out there who ain't taking Rattler 10 times out of 10, especially after what he did at Clemson last year. On that note, guys, speaking of Spencer Rattler, one last go, at least we think. No, one last go for the Gamecocks signal caller looking to move to 2-0 against Clemson. And, guys, this is a ball game that could truly cement his legacy, right? As one of the all-time greats, I think, in Gamecocks football history. I know that sounds weird to say, but you think about what's on the line for Spencer Rattler. This hasn't been the season that anybody wanted, right, from a team perspective. But you move to 2-0 against the rival, especially if you torch them through the air again and you have a good game. But you look at what Rattler needs to do, guys, on Saturday night. I don't think he's got to do what he did last year at Clemson. He doesn't necessarily have to throw for 330, 340, whatever it was. But taking care of the football, right? Against Kentucky, like people are going to look and say, oh, Rattler wasn't that good. The offense stunk. I mean, he wasn't the Rattler we've seen at home, certainly in the other games. But you know what Spencer Rattler did so well in that game? He was efficient, and he took care of the football, and he utilized his legs in the running game. I think you're going to have a similar performance because, guys, Clemson's defense, they are legit. Say whatever you want about the Tigers. They got one of the best defenses in college football, all 3 levels. That pass defense he torched, they're much better this year That linebacking core, they got the best duo of linebackers, I probably think, in all of college football. And their front four, it's as good as any as you're going to see across college football with Tyler Davis and Rook Orororo. I think that's how you say his name. Whatever it is, either way, Spencer Rattler, the opportunity that he's got on Saturday night to cement his legacy as one of the best in Gamecocks football history at that position, you got to think that's a major motivating factor for him in this game. The last game for him at Williams-Brice Stadium, and potentially wearing the garnet and black, because even if South kind of makes a bowl, guys, I mean, there's a good chance probably he goes, gets ready for the NFL draft, what have you, who knows. That may not happen, but still, this may be the last time we see Spencer Rattler in the garnet and black. Does he go out with a bang? Guys, sticking with the matchup offensively that I feel like everyone has been talking about this week. Xavier Legette against Nate Wiggins on the outside. A massive matchup on Saturday night. And a Clemson fan pointed this out that, hey, Clemson doesn't play man, they play zone more often. So it's kind of silly that folks are talking about this. But still, it's fun. It's fun to talk about key matchups and guys that'll be going mano-a-mano, one-on-one. There's going to come a point where Nate Wiggins is right on Xavier Legette. You've got to think that Clemson is going to do everything in their power to take 17 away. I mean, you have to think, guys. Because if I'm Clemson, I'm not letting one guy beat me. If South Carolina beats me, somebody else has got to have the game of their life. I'm not letting 17 be that dude. Now, that is much easier said than done. And I can't wait to watch this matchup, guys. I can't wait to watch these two guys go at it, a pair of dudes who are definitely going to be playing on Sundays. The physicality, the speed, the hands, guys. We've seen it all year from Xavier Legette. And give Nate Wiggins his credit. One of the better defensive backs in college football. Going to be a ton of fun who wins that matchup because, guys, back to Rattler, back to Legette. South Carolina, I think, is going to have to win this game through the air. They're going to have to lean on the passing game. They're going to have to lean on Rattler, right? Because of the obvious mismatch in the trenches and what that means for South Carolina. So that matchup on the outside, Xavier Legette, Nate Wiggins, that one's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to draw a lot of attention. It's drawn a lot of attention this week on social media. I can't wait to watch those two dudes go at it. Speaking of the offensive line, the running game, guys, admittedly, after watching that game against Kentucky, I am a bit more nervous about the offensive side of the football than I was before I witnessed that game. Because Kentucky dominated you up front. Let's call it for what it is. Kentucky won that football game in the trenches, or at least Kentucky's D-line against South Carolina's offensive line. Give Spencer Rattler a ton of credit for evading pressures. And, Kentucky only got 2 sacks, but they were in his hip pocket all night long. I mean, this guy, Spencer Rattler, had 10 carries, guys. That just goes to show you how many times he was rolling out, getting out of the pocket, making something out of nothing, what have you. After being stymied against Kentucky a week ago, and Deion Walker just having his way with Carolina, play after play after play, number 0 for Kentucky. A week after that, can South Carolina get any sort of run push? Can it get any sort of run push? I mean, listen, the Gamecocks, they run for 100 yards, they're winning this football game. If South Carolina runs for 70 yards, I could convince you, and I could convince myself, South Carolina is winning this football game. It's the same story all year long, guys. Carolina ain't got to rush for 200. They just have to be effective enough. Mario Anderson, that running game, they just have to be effective enough to keep Clemson honest, right? They've just got to be effective enough to have a semblance of balance to where Spencer Rattler can operate. Because if you do that, hey, guys, this has been a season of where, hey, if Spencer Rattler's got a clean pocket, sets his feet, delivers a throw, there have not been many times where that has happened, where it has not been a throw right on the money. So, can you generate any sort of run game? You're depleted at running back right now. It's Mario Anderson and Dontavius Braswell. That's it. That's who you're rolling with right now. Can Mario Anderson have one of his better games this season, lead that Gamecocks rushing attack, and at least keep Clemson honest? Guys, moving to special teams. We look back at last year's game, and I've joked about this, but I think it's true. Last year's game is where Kai Kroger set a lot of these unrealistic expectations about his game, right? So many people, Kai Kroger sucks. He's having a terrible year. Kai Kroger's chilling on NIL. And I think it's just because he was such a weapon in that Clemson game last year. I mean, a couple punts downed inside the 10, down inside the 5. You know, we saw him last year with the fakes, the touchdown passes, right? Beamer ball was massive in that game against Clemson last year. Massive. I mean, think about it, guys. Not just the punts. Clemson had a fumble on special teams on that kickoff return where they tried to out Beamer ball, and it blew up in their face. Does Beamer ball play a massive role yet again? Do we see special teams have as much a role? Because, too, it's like in these rivalry games, guys, it's stuff like that that does show itself more. And I think a lot of that has to do with the nerves and the emotions and just the adrenaline's pumping. And, like, you do things that are out of character, right? So you might fumble a punt. You might muff something. You might drop the football on a kickoff, whatever it might be, right? You might miss a field goal, whatever it is. So I just wonder, does Beamer ball play that big of a role yet again? It's been there in spurts for South Carolina this year. But the Gamecocks, I would argue, certainly need it to come up big on Saturday night. Guys, all week long and going into the game, of course, home field advantage is going to be talked about. Some of you are not going to like where I'm going with this, and that's okay. Home field advantage is going to be mentioned. Both these teams are bad on the road. The good news is the Gamecocks are the home team in this one. Clemson's 1-3 on the road. And you look at some of the crowds they've played against, right? I mean, I think the most was like 50,000, 55,000 somewhere. Safe to say Willie B is going to be an environment unlike anything Clemson's been in this season. But with that being said, I pose this question. How much does home field advantage really matter in the South Carolina-Clemson series? Because, guys, you look back at the numbers, and again, nobody wants to hear this ahead of a home game at night. I get that, but it's just an intriguing stat. Don't shoot the messenger. It's just an intriguing stat. The road team is 5-0 in the last 5 in covering the spread. Also, not going to like to hear this, but it's just real. South Carolina has not beaten Clemson at home since 2013. And Clemson all time, guys, they are 52, 32, and 3 at Williams-Brice Stadium. And if you look back at this series, guys, you go back all the way to the 90s, the road team has had a strange amount of success in this series. The road team has fared really, really well. So I'm not questioning Gamecock Nation. I'm not questioning the passion, the energy, the excitement, the light show. I'm not questioning any of it. All I'm saying is what history would tell you is that picking a win because of home field advantage, solely because of that, that's not typically the best route to take in this series, because home field advantage, it hasn't always spelled success. And guys, admittedly, I'm going to go a step further. You look back at last weekend, South Carolina, Kentucky. I wasn't in the building, but I talked to some who were. Guys, Willie B was dead in the second and the third quarter. So this defense having a big game, this defense playing one of their best games, I think is huge. Because think about it, guys. If your defense isn't good, if Clemson's able to run the football and pick up 5, 6, 7 yards of carry, that demoralizes not just the football team, but it takes the crowd out of it. And all of a sudden, home field advantage doesn't mean quite as much as we once thought it did. So home field advantage can be a very real thing on Saturday night, but it comes down to that Gamecocks defense making big plays early, probably forcing a couple turnovers, and keeping that crowd energetic, keeping that environment hostile. That's what it comes down to when you're talking about the home field advantage that South Carolina is hanging their hat on. And finally, guys, when you look at this game, I don't have to explain to you all or convince you all why is it a big deal to beat Clemson? Well, because it sucks to lose to them, right? I would think most folks probably, and this is fair to say, on both sides of the rivalry, you hate losing to your rival more than you enjoy beating them, because the pain of loss in this game and the hell that you have to endure, it's far worse than the jubilation. The celebration's great, right? The celebration's awesome, but man, you just don't want to lose it, right? So I don't have to convince you why it's a big deal to win, but the significance this specific season for South Carolina of beating Clemson, not just beating Clemson, but beating Clemson to get to 6 wins, making it back-to-back wins over Clemson. Guys, that'd be the first time since 2012, 2013. And also, Shane Beamer moving to 2-1 against Dabo Swinney. Guys, that would be a very, very big deal. You talk about from perception of the programs, both locally and nationally. You talk about recruiting. You talk about going out and getting talent in the transfer portal. Guys, you talk about the significance. Hey, let's just be honest with ourselves. You talk about the significance of beating Clemson in regards to what this offseason would look like. NIL. Folks are going to be a lot more willing to open their wallets and give if you beat the arch rival in the last game. Nobody on the South Carolina side is going to throw a parade and claim this season as a massive success, nor should they, even if you win on Saturday. But I tell you what, guys, it'll be much more fun to talk about the 2023 season if you win and you can say, you know what, even in Beamer's worst year, what you expect to be his worst year, South Carolina went to a bowl game and they beat their arch rival. Things didn't completely fall off the rails. That will at least be something you can look back on positively. You lose this game, nothing about the 2023 season will be viewed in a positive light. That's the difference. You win this game or lose this game, it literally dictates completely how you look back on the season. So it's huge for a number of reasons. And I don't need to explain to you guys any further why it means everything to people in this state. South Carolina, Clemson, yet again, a Palmetto Bowl we're all sure to remember. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, I'm locking in my prediction. Gamecocks, Tigers. What will I pick? We'll see. All that and more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose, while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, November the 22nd, 2023. Appreciate you all tuning in here on this Thanksgiving Eve. Do people say Thanksgiving Eve? I don't know. Is that a thing? I know Christmas Eve is a thing. Is Thanksgiving Eve a thing? Either way, guys, looking forward to enjoying Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to each and every single one of you. Hope you enjoy your time with family, friends, whoever it might be. Looking forward to family food, football, all that good stuff, and the endless debates of whether it's stuffing or dressing. And again, like Chris Marler said, I don't really care. Like it doesn't really. That's not something that really moves the needle for me, but I'm sure for many of you out there, it's kind of like the is a hot dog a sandwich thing. I don't know if it's a sandwich. I just know it's really, really good. Either way, guys, Marc Ryan will join the show at 1:35 p.m. Eastern time. He'll lock in his prediction for South Carolina Clemson. He'll lock in his prediction as well. So looking forward to hearing what Marc has to say on the rivalry matchup. With that being said, it is time. My prediction, South Carolina, Clemson. Enough said. Pure hatred, animosity, disdain, also maybe somewhat of a respect. But the intensity in this rivalry, it plays second fiddle to no one. And you might recall, I went on record last year. South Carolina, think about what was at stake. The Gamecocks entered that game losers of 7 straight in the rivalry. And when it gets to a point like that, you just feel like, man, our rival owns us. Like they own us. They got the mental edge in the game. They own us, right? I went off script last year over the summer and the week of the game. And I picked the Gamecocks to beat Clemson. I was one of the very, very few that did that. Giving myself a little pat on the back here. Either way, I was one of the very few that did that. Gamecocks went into Death Valley and pulled off that 31-30 victory, which I don't need to tell you all was a massive boost for Shane Beamer in year 2 of his program, a massive boost in recruiting, a massive boost for the fan base and the expectations going into year 3. This has been a season for both South Carolina and Clemson that most fans on both sides would rather forget. The Gamecocks' aspirations of matching last year's win total of 8 wins or maybe even exceeding that, getting to 9 or, God forbid, 10. The season has not even remotely lived up to those expectations, not even close from the opening snap in Charlotte. Think about that, from the opening snap. Meanwhile, couldn't we say the same thing about the Clemson Tigers? A team that, heck, yours truly, I picked to go to the college ball playoff. Clemson fans, aspirations and expectations of a return to the CFP. Dabo Swinney going out and getting Garrett Riley as his offensive coordinator. Cade Klubnik returning full-time as the starter. Everybody blamed DJU for the struggles last year. Hasn't worked out the way that most Tiger fans, or probably any, anticipated. Certainly not Tyler from Spartanburg, as Clemson enters this game 7-4. A means to salvage the season for each. It'll be jubilation, celebration, and somewhat of an exhale of relief for the winner, and an off season of pure hell for the loser. I made the joke back after the Clemson game, guys, back after opening weekend, the Clemson-Duke game, I should say. After opening weekend, both teams lost. Both teams looked terrible. And I said, I can't wait for 5-6 South Carolina to take on 5-6 Clemson for a shot at the Gasparilla Bowl later in the season at Williams-Brice Stadium. Little did I know how close I would actually be. Sure, Clemson's already punched their ticket to a bowl game, but I mean, South Carolina wins this one. Gamecocks and Tigers only finish a game apart in final result, and South Carolina's record will be in the SEC. Clemson's in the ACC, need I say more. What makes this fun, too, is neither team limps into this game, right? That's a lot of fun. Neither team limps into this game. South Carolina winners of 3 straight against Jacksonville State, Vandy, and, of course, that big one last weekend against Kentucky. And then there's Clemson really sparking their season, sparking this winning streak with that big win over Notre Dame, which I don't know that anybody gave the Tigers a chance or saw that coming. Beating Notre Dame, I believe it was Georgia Tech after that, if I recall correctly, and then North Carolina last week, of course. Clemson did a great job defensively holding down Drake May and securing the big home win. So both sides with positive momentum and reasons to feel good about themselves. Now, when you look at this game on the field on Saturday night, let's start offensively for South Carolina. Admittedly, I am more concerned now than I was, say, a week ago about, well, how is South Carolina going to move the football on Clemson? Because a week ago this time, the thought and belief was Rattler at home. This offense at home, Dabble Loggins at home. They've been electric. They've been elite. And Kentucky came in, who is solid defensively, but nowhere near what Clemson is. They came in and shut that down really quickly. Gamecocks with about 250 total yards of offense. And all of a sudden, I think we're left sitting here saying, maybe it was the competition in those home games. Furman, Mississippi State, Florida, whose defense isn't good, Jacksonville State, and Vanderbilt. Those were the home games in which the offense was electric and Spencer Rattler played out of his mind. So it makes you wonder. Also, Carolina's issues in the trenches, running the football. How do you get any sort of running game going with Mario Anderson against an elite Clemson front seven? For everything Clemson hasn't been this year, the front seven's still elite, right? But when you have a quarterback like Spencer Rattler, somebody who's beaten Clemson already, he knows what this rivalry is about, played in a hostile environment and won. When you got a guy like that, you got a shot. Spencer Rattler with the opportunity to cement his legacy, go 2-0 against the arch rival. And to be fair, he wasn't bad against Kentucky. Wasn't quite his gaudy numbers that we're used to seeing, but pair of touchdown passes, no turnovers, very clean game. He'll need to do that again. And then, of course, there's Xavier Legette, guys, who I said it last week on these airwaves, and I'll repeat myself. Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette have to play well. Like, your best players have to play well. And Spencer Rattler on Saturday night, he can't just be good, guys. Not in this game. He can't just be good. He has to be special. He has to be exceptional for South Carolina to win. Because I don't think South Carolina is going to be able to run the football. I just don't see it. If the Gamecocks run for 70 yards or more, chalk up Carolina getting the win. I just don't see it, though. It's going to be tough sledding all night. South Carolina will have to win with the passing game. And against the Clemson secondary, that is much better than they were last year. Guys, Clemson offensively gives up 288 yards per game, only 166 through the air. And you look at the Tigers' track record this year, they've done a good job of holding down elite quarterbacks. The latest, Drake May last week, held him to 100 yards under his season average, per game average, and about 20% less in regards to completion percentage than his average. So Clemson's played some big-time quarterbacks, and they have fared very well. Now, on the other side, South Carolina's defense riding a wave of momentum. Can they carry that over in this game? Clemson cannot take care of the football for whatever reason. Cannot take care of the football. 20 turnovers, 13 fumbles lost. They've struggled mightily to just handle the ball. Will Shipley, Phil Maffa, as good as they've been running the ball, they've had their issues with fumbles. They've had their issues. South Carolina's defense, up until a couple weeks ago, guys, have been abysmal every single game this season. It's amazing how playing teams like Jacksonville State and Vandy can get your confidence high, right? But to give credit where credit's due, South Carolina's defense was awesome against Kentucky. They're the reason the Gamecocks won that football game, and they're the reason why South Carolina even has a chance to reach bowl eligibility. Now, as we mentioned, Kentucky and Clemson aren't mirror images, but a lot of similarities. Clemson's just going to be a way better version of what Kentucky was doing. The Garrett Riley offense, they want to be spread, maybe not quite as much play action, but Clemson wants to run the football. That's for sure. That's where it starts and ends for them. The Shipley-Maffa duo, and of course, Will Shipley, a guy that has torched this Gamecocks defense in 2 games. Last year, if they keep giving them the football, they probably win the game. Let's call it for what it is. South Carolina has forced 10 turnovers the last 3 games. Can they keep that up? I think it's going to take winning the turnover margin, guys. I think it's going to take a couple turnovers. And if you can slow down the run and make Clemson one-dimensional, and this becomes a quarterback battle, South Carolina has the clear advantage with Spencer Rattler over Cade Klubnik. And then there's special teams, guys. Beamer ball. You hate to go into a game and say, man, that has to click for Carolina to win. But, I mean, we've seen it before. Kai Kroger, Mitch Jeter. Is it a block kick? Is it a block punt? Is it a big play on a kickoff return, punt return? That clears the path to a South Carolina victory and back-to-back wins. This is always a really tough pick for me because you talk about separating the head and the heart and what the heart wants versus what the head wants and going with your, what your logic tells you, your football sense and not just your fandom. This is a tough pick. It really is. And over the summer, I picked Clemson to win this game. At that point, though, I thought Clemson was going to be a juggernaut, truly. I thought Clemson was going to be much better. I thought they were going to be a college football playoff team, and silly me. The jinx worked, though, I will say. That was a great jinx I had. Either way, you look at this game. I think this rivalry has as much juice and as much energy as it's had in so long because neither side really knows what version of their team is going to show up. Neither side really knows what's going to happen. Williams-Brice Stadium is going to be packed out. It's going to be electric. It's going to be a raucous environment on Saturday night. But I don't think it's going to matter. I think South Carolina is going to struggle to stop Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, that 1-2 duo. I'm not saying they're going to run for 200 apiece. But I still question South Carolina's front 7 and slowing down the run game. I don't think Cade Klubnik is some great player. I think Clemson will be better served probably going out in the portal and getting a quarterback this offseason. But I just don't know, and it's hard for me to believe. South Carolina stifled a Kentucky offense that was ranked almost 100th nationally. And I know Clemson's not world beaters. But I think they're going to be able to run the football enough. I think offensively, I think Spencer Rattler plays a clean game. But the Gamecocks, you talk about a team that's not going to be able to run the football. I don't see much of anything getting going there, right? Gamecocks had 50 rushing yards against Kentucky. 27 of them came from Rattler himself. So I think it's going to be another scenario like that where that Clemson defensive line takes over this game. I think Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, they're going to get theirs. They're going to make big plays. They're great players. They're going to make big plays. And so a lot of this game really does, as low-hanging fruit as it is, it really does come down to turnover margin. If South Carolina wins the turnover margin by 2 or more, they win the game. There's no question. They win the game, right? If Clemson's coughing up the football like they've done all season, they win the game. And I think South Carolina will force a turnover or two. I do. I really do, because Clemson's turned it over every game. They're going to turn the football over. Can South Carolina capitalize when they get those opportunities? That'll be big as well. Red zone efficiency will be huge. The biggest difference is this. The biggest difference in last week and this week. South Carolina is going to force a couple turnovers. I don't see the Gamecocks playing a clean football game offensively, because I think Spencer Rattler, it's going to be all on him. He's going to be under duress. I would not be surprised if later in this ball game, he's trying to force some things. He's trying to force some throws, and Clemson's defense is good enough to make him pay and make this South Carolina offense pay. I wasn't nearly as worried about the offense until I watched the Kentucky game. And I just, after watching that, I think South Carolina's skill position players, in a lot of instances, are better than Clemson's. But Clemson has the clear advantage where it matters most. That is the trenches. Clemson still, top to bottom, is the more talented team. They have more quality depth. I don't think anybody's denying that. I think this is a really close, competitive, back-and-forth ball game. I think it's a fourth quarter battle. I think it goes down to the wire. But as I mentioned before, the road team has had so much success in this series. So I don't think that home field advantage, I don't know that it really matters. I don't think it's a reason to make a pick. I just don't. I don't think it's a reason to make a pick in this game. So I think Willie B's going to be shaking, going to be rocking. I think the run game of Clemson will neutralize that. I think Cade Klubnik and that Garrett Riley offense will make a couple plays there, but I think a lot of it's going to be run game. And I think Clemson last year, one of the reasons South Carolina was able to take advantage and win that football game, Clemson stopped feeding Will Shipley. I don't think they make that mistake again. I think they feed Will Shipley. I think they feed Phil Moffitt. They do just enough in the passing game, but I think it's the running game that leads Clemson up and down the field. I think South Carolina, it'll be a valiant effort, but I think the thing that held this team back all season long is going to hold this football team back yet again, and it's the offensive line, at least on the offensive side. Four-quarter battle, back and forth, revenge on the mind for the Tigers. And I think Clemson will get their revenge at Williams-Brice Stadium. Guys, lock me in. I've got Clemson 27, South Carolina 20. And again, I don't have to say it. I shouldn't have to say it. I'd love to be wrong about the pick, but I'm going with my head, not my heart. Running game for Clemson makes a difference. South Carolina, I wouldn't be surprised. I say they win the turnover margin by 1, but I think they have to win it by 2 or more to win the football game. I don't think South Carolina is as efficient as they were against Kentucky. And for those reasons, I think Dabo Swinney and company get their revenge, get their 8th win, sending South Carolina to 5-7 and a long offseason in the capital city. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll get our good friend Marc Ryan of the Fan Upstate on the show. Really excited to hear his thoughts, his predictions, his picks, all that good stuff, guys. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose, while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle doggy ho, doggy ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, November the 22nd, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, in case you missed it, I have locked in my prediction for South Carolina Clemson. I do have the Tigers getting the victory 27-20 at Williams-Brice Stadium. I'm sure many of you just hit this unsubscribe button or are leaving some bad review of me or what have you, but That's fine. That's fine. It is what it is, man. Admittedly, I never thought South Carolina was winning their last 4 in a row. I mean, there's a reason, guys. After Jacksonville State, I said that I put $1,000 on it that South Carolina wouldn't. And, did it surprise me Carolina beat Vandy? Certainly not. Did it surprise me they beat Vandy? Certainly not. Did it surprise me they beat Kentucky? I mean, not really. I picked it. But never thought that South Carolina was going to win out. And so that's where we are, guys. So, again, I've got the Tigers getting the W 27-20. I'd love to be wrong. I think I could be wrong. Again, if Clemson's turning the football over, South Carolina's making big plays. Spencer Rattler has, a great game, and the offensive line plays well. I very well think it could happen. I think it's going to be the most competitive South Carolina-Clemson game in the sense and from the standpoint of nobody knows what is happening or nobody knows what's going to happen. I think there's as much juice in the rivalry as we've seen in quite some time. But that's where I'm going, guys. Clemson 27, South Carolina 20. And looking forward to it on Saturday. Again, guys, do not forget the postgame call-in show will take place on Saturday night immediately following the conclusion of the game. Win, lose, or draw, got a feeling that it's going to be electric. Guys, that being said, we're going to go ahead and get him in here if he's ready. He joins us every single Thursday, typically on the show. But, of course, with Thanksgiving holiday, no live show Thursday, Friday, what have you. Had to get him in here early, though, to talk about this game. And, of course, don't forget, I join and jump on his airwaves every Monday at 4:40. Of course, I'm talking Marc Ryan of the Fan Upstate. He joins us on Palmetto Bowl week. What is going on, my friend? Happy early Thanksgiving to you and yours, and happy rivalry week, my man. What's going on?
Happy Thanksgiving to you and all of the great Daily Crow listeners. We appreciate you guys, and it's great to have you guys with us today. Hope you guys just have the best Thanksgiving ever. Stuffing as the number one Thanksgiving side dish for the win, and creamed onions. They look like sheep balls. That's this Thanksgiving side dish to avoid like the plague. Chris Phillips, can I get an amen?
Amen. I'll give you the amen there. Yeah. I don't know if ever, what was the last thing you said again?
Creamed onions, brother.
I don't know if I've had that.
They look like testisatchels. You do not want them at all.
I don't think I've had those.
No.
Very
Definitely
good. Very good. Well, Marc, dude, like I said, man, I appreciate you chiming in again. This is a fun week for everybody in the Palmetto State in regards to content. Those who talk about it, it's the electricity at a fever pitch. But I'll ask you this. You're a Florida man, Florida State. What does rivalry week mean to you? What's the level of hatred like between the Gators and the Seminoles?
It's not top five. It's not top five in college football, Chris. I came out with a graphic this week. Invite your listeners to check that out on my Twitter at Marc Ryan on Air. That's at MARC Ryan on Air. Top 5 most hate-filled rivalries in college football. Drum roll, please. Number 5, the Egg Bowl. I don't need to tell anyone here what matchup that is. Number 4, Oklahoma, Texas. Number 3, South Carolina, Clemson. Now, why did I say South Carolina, Clemson and not Clemson, South Carolina? Because according to rule number 6 of the rules of sports fandom, if you win the most recent rivalry game, your name goes first in the rivalry. That is absolutely and totally true. Number 2 is the Iron Bowl. Number 1 is the game, Michigan and Michigan State. Florida State. Look, man, Florida's just a different animal as a state in general. You have divided loyalties. You have people from all over the place. It's a transient state. Everyone that's part of Clemson, South Carolina, Clemson. That's for saying Clemson, South Carolina first. I should know better than that. South Carolina, Clemson. You guys are from here. You were born into this rivalry. It's different than Florida State, where most of us were adopted into that rivalry, right? Like we came from other places to join that rivalry. So I don't quite think it's there on the hate scale. But listen, brother, there's no shortage of what's on the line when Florida plays Florida State on Saturday as well. Florida State playing for a college football playoff berth. And let me tell you, brother, I am not one to want to willingly volunteer myself to defend my rival. But if they manage to keep Florida State out of the college football playoff with an undefeated record, that would be the biggest BS I've ever seen. You have no right to assume, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. You have no right to assume what Florida State is going to be without Jordan Travis. But we do know they earn the right to be there should they be undefeated. And it was not that long ago, 9 years ago, in 2014, that the committee could have kept third string QB Ohio State out of the college football playoff. And all they did was Cardale Jones was win the damn thing. So if Florida State wins, they darn well should be in. And if Florida loses, well, there's going to be no bowl game. And I got to be honest with you, Chris, a scale of 1 to 10, my feeling that Billy Napier's the right guy for the job in Gainesville long-term is about a 2.5 or a 3 right now.
I did hear you say, Mark, a couple days ago that you are out on Billy Napier being the long-term answer. By the way, I want to go back to you were mentioning your graphic top 5 rivalries. Number 1, you meant Michigan-Ohio State, correct?
That's right.
Okay, you said Michigan State. I just wanted to clarify.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, I said Michigan State.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I thought you were going to hit me with, I said Ohio State, Michigan, which would again be a violation because Michigan won the most recent rivalry game. Right. Yeah. So no. Thank you very much for the correction.
No, you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure people knew.
Michigan State isn't a rivalry, man. That is a bully. Okay, that is a bully. That's Chris. You got to meet certain parameters for something to be called a rivalry. A year ago, South Carolina was in danger of that game no longer being in a rivalry. What was it? 7 in a row? Was it 7 in a row last year? If you get to 10, it's no longer a rivalry. So South Carolina had 3 chances to make it a rivalry again, and they did so. That buys you another 9 years of having a rivalry, right? And I think you and I may have sparred on this before, but Chris, you got to meet the parameters. Otherwise, you're not a rival. You are either the bully or getting bullied, one of the two.
To your point, Mark, the chatter around this game this year, but starting literally since last year's game ended, and of course throughout the offseason, the preseason, and now the week of, it is certainly much more fun to talk about, hey, this is a 1-score spread. This is a game where it's a 50-50 coin flip. Neither fan base knows what's going to happen versus literally last year, Mark, we were talking about, hey, when's the next time South Carolina's going to beat Clemson again? Is it going to be in this decade? Is it going to be 7 years? Like, you know what I'm saying? So this is a lot more fun. I want to get to the Palmetto Bowl, though, Mark, and I think it's really interesting. It's really cool, too, and I think unique because you sit smack dab in the middle of it. I understand you're in the upstate. More of your audience is Clemson fans, which makes total sense. But you truly are a neutral party stuck in the middle of this hatred-filled rivalry. What has that been like for you? Can you compare that to any other experience that you've had? Because, again, you come from Florida State, but, I mean, you got thrown smack dab in the middle of it, and whether people believe it or not, you give your critical analysis and maybe some jabs here and there at the Gamecocks. You do the same to Clemson. You catch hell from both sides. I mean, what has that experience been like? Because that, to me, is just fascinating, and I admire you for taking it on, truly.
Chris, it's been my career dream to be in an environment like this, man. I mean, it's what I always dreamed of. Folks have said to me when they're trying to take a shot in my direction, you're the Paul Feinbaum of South Carolina versus Clemson. That's the best compliment you could ever give me. What does Paul Feinbaum do? He's in the middle of it. He takes jabs at both sides, and he gives his audience the opportunity to become the stars themselves. Characters in the drama of the rivalry themselves. And that's exactly what we do, brother. It is awesome. We praise where warranted. We criticize where warranted. People always say to me, well, Mark Ryan, you wouldn't criticize if your station carried them. To those people, I would invite you to rewind on the Odyssey app to the first segment of Monday's show, where we carry Furman football. 9-1 Furman lost to 1-9 Wofford. I lit into Furman more than anybody's ever lit into anybody for that loss on Monday. And I told my boss, I said, boss, I know you're going to be nervous about this because we carry Furman games. All right. But I'm going to tell you this. I got to go in on Furman for that absolute crapping of the bed against 1-9 Wofford, where they were the number 2 team in FCS and we're about to have home field advantage throughout the FCS playoffs, I got to go in on them the same way I would on anybody else. Otherwise, I have no credibility, and people start calling you a homer, and you won't go on this team like you go on that team. The reality is, Chris, if South Carolina had Clemson's last 10 years, it would be Clemson fans who hate me, right? But the reality is Clemson's had the best 10 years of their existence. South Carolina has largely, in the Muschamp and Beamer area, been a joke. Let's call it what it is, right? It's been a very mediocre joke of a program. And I'm charged with helping you guys lift your self-esteem to the point where the program can achieve much better than that, right? That's why we're here. It begins with your expectations. Ultimately, your program will be a reflection of what you will accept, right? Before Steve Spurrier, it was a joke. After Steve Spurrier, it's been a joke. It's time to stop being the punchline, Gamecocks. Let's effing go.
So to that point, Mark, sticking with that, this has been, for both sides, it's been a disappointing season, to say the least. I know you brought up a couple weeks ago, whether it was on your show or my show, about the post that I had after South Carolina lost to UNC, Clemson lost to Duke. So both teams lose on opening weekend. I made the joke, hey, can't wait to watch 5-6 South Carolina, 5-6 Clemson, battle it out for a shot at bowl eligibility. We're not quite there, but we were pretty close. We were closer than I thought we would be, to be honest with you. Clemson comes in 7-4, South kind of 5-6. What have you sensed the mood this week from Gamecock fans and Tiger fans? Because I feel like both are on edge right now. Neither knows what to expect. To your point, like you mentioned, neither, even if you win this game, are going to look back at 2023 and say, wow, what a successful year this was, because neither has reached their goals or expectations. But certainly we know what winning the rivalry game means. What's the overall vibe you get from both fan bases going in this one?
Look, Chris, I think the fact that both teams have had underwhelming, disappointing seasons is adding to the fuel to this game, and I challenge you, man. If Clemson was 11-1 and South Carolina was 7-4, would the game be bigger than it is now? You want the game no matter what. It's a must win no matter what. But I get the sense, brother, there is survival on the line here. One of these two programs is going to have the Mortal Kombat finish him hanging over them when they lose this game, right? Like, do you not agree? One of these two programs finish him. You're heading right toward that at the end of this one, man. And it's going to be 9 months of hell, 9 months of misery, and a downward trajectory for the program, for the loser of this game. That's why I think the disappointing seasons for both have made this game more imperative, right? And more compelling. And I'm here for it. Get your popcorn ready.
To your point, Mark, one of the best analogies, our good friend, our mutual friend, Jake Crane, told me that the difference in winning than losing this game Saturday is the winner of this one sleeps on silk sheets to a degree for the offseason. The loser lies on a bed of nails. That is the difference in this one for sure. When you take a look at the matchup, Mark, both teams have won 3 in a row, which I think is actually good for the rivalry. To your point, I think it's much better that both these teams are coming in on some high notes, if you will. We know Clemson wants to run the football, right, with Phil Maffa, Will Shipley. Cade Klubnik's been better of late. They've had real trouble taking care of the football, turned it over in every single game. 13 lost fumbles, 20 turnovers total. South Carolina, last 3 games defensively, has forced 10 turnovers. On the flip side, it comes down to Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette, right, Mark? I don't see how South Carolina is going to be able to run the football against that Clemson front seven. More than likely, I would say definitely Spencer Rattler's last game at Williams-Brice Stadium, the great matchup on the outside between Legette and Wiggins. I know I just loaded you up with a lot, so maybe we'll start with one. Let's just start with when Clemson has the ball, the South Carolina defensive matchup, because you've talked a lot this week about turnovers, the importance of that. The numbers would say South Carolina or Clemson's going to turn the football over. It's about, can South Carolina take care of the football? Because Clemson more than likely is going to cough it up. What do you see in that matchup when Clemson has the football against the Gamecocks defense?
I'm going to give you a really interesting stat that I put together today, Chris. All right. Clemson outscored, right, its last 9 opponents. Okay, well, this is how I should word this. In its last 9 opponents, Clemson held its opposition to 11 points fewer than per game, 11 points less per game than what those teams scored when they weren't playing Clemson, right? Those teams' averages. Clemson held them 11 points below their average. The last 3 games for Clemson, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Clemson held those teams 16 points per game below their average. South Carolina is averaging 28 points a game. To me, the magic number for Clemson is 20. Okay? You consider that, and I'm like, okay, let's be conservative here. You know, if you split the difference between 11 and 16 points, I mean, what that defense is doing to teams relative to their average, you could say, man, Clemson could win this potentially with 14 points. But you don't want to rely on that, as you said, with Clemson's offense coughing the football up in disadvantageous situations as often as they are, right? So I think conservatively, 20 points is the magic number for Clemson. If you get first digit 2 and you didn't only score 2 points, then Clemson likely wins this game, in my opinion. Look what Kentucky did to South Carolina's offense last week. Clemson's got a better defense than that. It's just that the turnover bug, man. And the reason why Clemson's having Cade Klubnik play the game manager role, right, is because why wouldn't you? You know, like that dude doesn't listen to the freaking play calls that come in to the head coach. For the second time this year, they give him specific orders and he does something else. And I like what, regardless of what the excuse is, dude, if it's that he's just brain farts and panics and does something else, or if he's just willingly not listening to the head coach, that's insubordination. Like you follow the orders of your supervisor, right? I have to do that, right? Chris, you work for yourself, so you got to follow the orders of yourself. That's a great place to be. But, you know, we all have to follow orders that we don't necessarily like sometime. If you don't do so, that's insubordination. I just think it's fascinating to consider how few points Clemson actually needs, right? Mm-hmm. To kind of be in pole position in this game. I think 20 is the magic number.
So on the flip side, Mark, the question then becomes, how does South Carolina, say, score 24, 27, upwards of that number against this Clemson defense? We saw what they did last year. Spencer Rattler played out of his mind. Can he replicate that performance? Can just he and Xavier Legette do enough? Do you think South Carolina has to generate some sort of running game, find a way, have some semblance of balance against a really, really good front seven, as I mentioned? Like, what has to happen for the Gamecocks to win this football game and do enough offensively to beat the Tigers?
You have to run enough to keep Clemson's defensive line honest, to prevent them from pinning their ears back and coming at South Carolina. And the reason people say that is because of running lanes and passing lanes, right? That half second that you are waiting before you know whether it's run or pass is everything to an offense. You got to run, even if it's 2 yards a pop. You got to run, Chris, I think at least 1/3 of the time if you're South Carolina. Then it comes down to me, the turnover margin, as we said all year. I think if the turnover margin is even, I think Clemson wins this game comfortably by double digits. If the turnover margin is South Carolina +1, I think Clemson wins a close game. If it's South Carolina +2 or more, I think the Gamecocks win this one. All right. But I think generally speaking, Chris, like for most of this week, I've been more along the lines of a Clemson comfortable victory than this super close game that most people are describing. And there's no hate involved in that. I've just really been watching Clemson closely the last few weeks, and provided this just isn't a flip switch that they only do at home, right? Defense travels. They figured out, man, as long as we don't let Cade Klubnik and Moffitt Shipley's fumbles lose it for us, this defense is going to have us in the game against Georgia. This defense is going to have us in the game against Michigan, against Ohio State. Stop screwing the game up. Fumbles and Klubnik, stop doing it. So they've really kind of put the clamps on the offense, doing just enough to win and really letting the defense take over. And it's been impressive to see.
Mark, I know you'll be giving your official prediction on your show today, but if you're ready to give the pick, and I'll start with this because you asked me, I believe, on Monday, And our last segment, I just locked it in, just posted on social media. I do have Clemson winning the football game 27-20. To your point, I think the Tigers are going to turn it over because they have all year. But I think South Carolina is going to turn it over. I think Clemson's defense is going to do enough to get after Spencer Rattler. He's going to force one at some point. I think South Carolina, so to your point, I think they win the turnover margin, but it's not by enough to secure the victory. So I've got 27-20. What say you about that? And then if you want to lock in your pick and lock in your prediction, and to your point, it's not like a bias or a hatred. It's a real objective pick, and I'm going with my head and not my heart in this one.
I'm interested to delay my pick here, Chris, as I decide whether
That's
I
fine.
want to give this.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to do that.
So I'm surprised that you said Spencer Rattler is almost certainly gone. I'm surprised about that. Based on what pre-draft evaluation that you've seen, is he almost certainly gone?
Admittedly, I have not looked at all of the draft boards or anything, but I mean, I have to imagine he's a second or third rounder. I mean, I'd be stunned if he came back, Mark. I'd be stunned. I'd be
even if he's
stunned.
a fourth round or fifth round pick. You think he's gone if he's any pick?
I thought he was gone after last year. So, I mean, I was wrong then. I could be wrong now. But he also just accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl. So, I mean, that would tell you that more than likely he is – I mean, he can still come back. So, Tyler Davis for Clemson did that last year, accepted the invite, changed his mind. So, I guess if he gets some information that changes his mind, he could do it. I mean, I would be really surprised. I'm not banking on it. I feel like most have accepted that next year is going to be the Lenoris Sellers show. But to be fair, Juice Wells has announced his return. So, God, could they run it back again, man? That would just be
massive
absolutely
for
insane.
South Carolina. That's massive. And you know what? I had the thought, Chris, about this. I don't know what Juice Wells is going through. I actually feel badly for on your show kind of like, man, what's going on there? Like, what is, is this an NFL thing? What if, Chris, there's a mental component to this and you never want to you know what I'm saying? Because the longer this goes on, the more that's what it sounds like to me. Okay. I don't know what's going on. I want to make that perfectly clear. But at the same time, we've heard Shane Beamer intimate that he wants Juice Wells to get his mind right. And so,
Mark, not to cut you off, I'll give you the quote that Beamer had in his presser yesterday. Quote, "If he decides he's in the right frame of mind to play, great, but I don't anticipate him playing." What does that mean? What does that mean?
It's one of those things where it's like, we don't know. But let's say it was something, Chris, like depression or something like that. Let's say it was something like that, right? The only thing guys like me and you wondering aloud, what is this? Is this guy getting ready for the draft? I mean, that just makes it harder on somebody going through that, right? So as I parse Beamer's words and try to figure out what Beamer's really saying, because there's the chance it could be something like that, I'm backing off that completely because I want Juice Wells to have the time to get himself right? Especially if it is something like that. And the guarantee that you won't is if you feel like the walls are caving in on you. Are you trying to get ready for the NFL, man? Like what's going on? Give him the chance to get himself right. Chris, let me mention one other thing to you. I had the Florida Gator Nation coming after me the other day because I floated the. Do you know what I'm going to talk about here? Do you know what I'm going to mention?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I mentioned if you were Billy Napier, all right, would you? Are you familiar with DJ Lagway?
The quarterback, yes.
Yes, 5-star quarterback committed to Florida. Yes. Would you allow DJ to tell you what he's comfortable with regarding Graham Mertz coming back or not coming back next year? Florida Gator Nation went nuts. They're like, you idiot. Billy Napier would never do that, you moron. And I'm just like, I just asked a question. I didn't say what I would do. I asked a question. You don't think these conversations go on? I asked Jake Crane that question. Jake Crane said, not a dumb question, Mark. If Graham Mertz had been what we thought Graham Mertz was going to be, you would say, Graham, thanks for your service. We're going to move in a different direction. If you'd like to play your future college ball, it's probably not going to be here, etc. But I bring that up to you, Chris, from the South Carolina standpoint and Lenora Sellers. What if Lenora Sellers doesn't want to wait another year before it's his time to play? Would Gamecock Nation rather have another year of Spencer Rattler or, and a ticked off Lenora Sellers that may not want to be there anymore? I'm not speaking for him. I'm just saying maybe. We've seen that happen before in college football, right? There's not an opportunity for me here in my time frame. I'm going to go somewhere else. I mean, Chris, what's better for the program? Is it better for the program to flip the script to Lenora Sellers, or is it better for the program for Spencer Rattler to come back? That's what I was asking. Gator Nation rained down fire and brimstone on me for saying, look, if you're Billy Napier, do you think he gives DJ Lagway some of the decision-making power on Graham Mertz there? Because you damn sure don't want to lose DJ Lagway so you can have a transfer portal QB come back for another year, right?
I would say, Mark, and I don't think it's a dumb question at all. I think if we're being real and honest with ourselves and the fact that, like, this is turning into professional football where, like, coaches have to manage a roster, right? So, I mean, they're going to do what's best for the roster, best for the football team, best for the program moving forward, especially when you don't have forever to win, right? You can't just kind of move aimlessly and say, well, we have plenty of time. Like, no, you don't have plenty of time. With the whole Spencer Rattler conversation, I would just say this. In the world of NIL and understanding the landscape and understanding South Carolina's NIL situation, Mark, they got a lot of money tied up in Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells. And if you want my personal opinion, I'd rather South Carolina take the $1 or $1.5 million they're giving Spencer Rattler and go out and get some linemen, go out and get some receivers, go out and get another tight end, go out and get some defensive linemen, and begin the Lenora Sellers era, if you want my honest opinion. I just, like, Spencer Rattler was great this year, and the Gamecocks are fighting for their bowl lives in the last week of the season. You see what I'm saying? So, like, I just, I think you have to be strategic and very tactful in those type of circumstances, those situations. I mean, I say the same thing with Juice Wells. Like, I mean, every player now you look at, Mark, and you say, hey, you want this guy to come back or that guy, but, like, it has to be for the right price because that's college football now. It is. We've talked about this whole salary cap thing. You have a salary cap. It's got to be for the right price. So, I don't think Rattler's going to come back. Maybe the draft, great. Maybe there's something I don't know. But, I mean, how much better of a season could he have, Mark? That's my thing. Like, how much better of a season could Rattler really come back and have next year?
It's not about him, Chris. It's about what's around him. You got to make what's around him better. You got to make the lines better around him, defensive line, offensive line, et cetera. Get Juice Wells back healthy. But that was the point I was making is that, I'm not going to allow one more year of Graham Mertz to cost me DJ Lagway. And that's why if I was Billy Napier, I'd bring DJ Lagway into the discussion because I'm not going to welcome Graham Mertz back if that's going to make DJ Lagway have a wavering eye in his recruitment. There's Clemson fans that think he's going to flip to them. You think I'm bringing Graham Mertz back if it means that? Urban Meyer once said if they hadn't gotten Tim Tebow and it came down to the last minutes between Alabama and Florida, that it would have set the program back 5 years. You think Florida football can afford being set back another 5 years by not getting the quarterback? So that's why I ask you that, man. I mean, I get it. I get it. And so here's the positive sign for Gamecock fans is that I don't necessarily believe that you guys, the Gamecocks, take a step back next year if Lenora Sellers is the guy. Why? Because there's going to be a much bigger running component to the offense from the quarterback, and the lines are going to be better. So you might look up and the total yards per game might be more this year. And you're going to say, well, how did this happen? Well, you got a running game now from the quarterback, and you got better offensive line play, right? So I don't assume that just because Rattler is out and Lenoris is in, that the QB position, the productivity is going to be worse. With that said, Chris, the score prediction for the game is, you gave me enough time to work through that in my head, is 26-17 Clemson. That's the final score, 26-17. The magic number is 20 for Clemson to get to. I think they go a little bit over that. And I do believe that it'll be competitive, right? It'll be competitive. But as we're in the fourth quarter, I think Gamecock fans are going to realize that Clemson has it under control. You know, I think that's going to be the realization.
Mark, just a couple more minutes of your time, if you don't mind. I know you got to run and get ready for your show. When you look at this game, I mean, both sides would argue how badly they want it, they need it. Who do you think needs it more moving forward in regards to you look at neither's had a successful season, and neither I know you're going to be coming at the winner, right? Because there's going to be some that are going to paint the season as it was a success because you beat the rival. And it's like, no, let's not move the goalpost. So who needs it more for just the sake of having something to feel good about in 2023, moving through the offseason, building for 2024? Who would you say needs it more, Clemson or South Carolina?
This is an interesting question, Chris. In terms of the person who needs it the most, I think it's Dabo Swinney, because you saw Tyler and Spartanburg and all this dissent coming at Dabo this year. You can't have a losing record against the new South Carolina coach. In terms of the program that needs it more, it's South Carolina. And to me, it's very easily said, person versus program, right? Dabo needs it the most as an individual person. Beamer, with a loss, still has the love of Gamecock Nation. Dabo, I think, is really feeling the heat, not in terms of losing his job, but just the natives being restless and upset if he loses. But in terms of a program, Chris, if you fail to make a bowl game, this season is an unmitigated disaster for South Carolina if you fail to make a bowl game. Plus, you've lost all goodwill. You've lost all momentum that you built in the first couple of years. Plus, as we said, year 3 is the year where the coaches who are going to pop and become stars typically do, right? So how do you explain 7-6, 7-6, 8-4, 5-7? Has Beamer then defined what is going to be the range for him at South Carolina? The reason I don't think Napier's the guy at Florida, Chris, is because I think he's always going to be between a floor of 5-7 and a ceiling of 9-3. And you know, what must be done eventually should be done immediately. I just don't think he's the guy. Now, if Florida has an 8-4, 9-3 season, you're going to have a lot of Gator fans coming at me saying, I told you so. And I'm going to go back to, under Napier, I believe the floor is 5-7, the ceiling is 9-3. If that's good enough for you, you have the right head coach. If it's not, and it isn't for me, then you need a different one. You know, Gamecocks, I'll ask you guys the same question, right? Do you believe your ceiling and floor have now been defined? Is the floor under Beamer 5-7, and is the ceiling 8-5, right? If that's the case, is that good enough for you? If so, you have the right head coach. If not, you might need a different one. That's how I feel about it, Chris, and that's why I feel like as a program, Beamer and company and the whole program desperately need this one. This season is a failure with a capital F, with a Gamecock loss on Saturday.
Marc Ryan of the Fan Upstate, 3-7. He's live every single day over at the Fan Upstate. Mark, last thing, outside of Florida State, because I know your heart holds a special place for that one, favorite rivalry and most underrated rivalry in college football?
Oh, man, I love me some Oregon State, man. I love seeing that.
Friday night game this year. Friday night game.
I love the quality of those teams. You know, you consider Missouri, Oregon State for the coaches getting the most out of the least, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I believe Beamer is not in that getting the least category. He can recruit at a top 10, top 15 level potentially. But those are good models for him to watch, right, Chris? Because if Oregon State can do it with their talents, and and if Missouri can do it with their talents, why not South Carolina? Why not now? You're getting better talent through the recruiting services than those guys, right? So that is, to me, the most underrated rivalry in all of college football. No offense, Chris. Like I value and love our servicemen and women, but I've never been an Army Navy guy because I like good football, you know. And I don't see that very often in that game, you know. So to me, Chris, when all is said and done, I come back to Michigan, Ohio State, and I love, and I'm going to miss so badly the fact that the 12-team playoff is going to give that game a safety net. I hate that. I love the fact that the loser has their season ruined every year. Imagine how much it's going to suck, Chris, when it's like 11-0 Michigan, 11-0 Ohio State. Okay, you win. Oh, well, we're still in the playoff. Versus you lose, you're probably out. You're probably out. You're out of the Big Ten division championship. You're out of the Big Ten championship game. You're out of the college football playoff. You're out of the national championship. Brother, you went from a national championship favorite to a bowl game with that loss. The best thing about the 4-team CFP or the BCS era was that there was no safety net. None. And it made every single week a playoff. And no game embodies that more than the game between Michigan and Ohio State. What do you think?
I would say Ohio State, Michigan's probably the best. I guess I should be saying Michigan, Ohio State is the best. Shame on me. Shame on me. Is the best rivalry in all of college football because of what's on the line year after year. The Iron Bowl is certainly up there. My most underrated rivalry, I think it's the Egg Bowl. I think Mississippi State Ole Miss is just nasty, and the teams aren't, the teams normally aren't very good, right? Like, and it's still just got this hatred, right? But what we love, the hatred we love about college football. So, Marc, Ryan, Marc, I appreciate you taking the time, man. This is always a lot of fun. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend. Cannot wait to break down what happens on Saturday with you next week.
We look forward to it. I'll be on the air on Monday. Chris, I've got a vacation now. Saturday, I got CBS shows tomorrow, local show today on the Fan Upstate, CBS shows tomorrow and Friday. And then I'm off Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with one exception. I would never miss the chance to do a show on Monday. Okay? Would never miss that chance. So I'll show you this, Chris. It's a bit of a mess. Forgive me for a minute. But that equipment right there, okay, that equipment right there is coming with me to Florida, where I'll be doing one show on my vacation. It'll be the Monday Offsides highest rated show of the year. You'll be on there as well. We look forward to it. Thanks for having me, man.
And I meant to tell you, Marc, congratulations on all the success with the CBS Sports Radio national stuff. That is big time if folks don't realize. Very, very big time. So
thank you so much. I got to tell you a little something about that off the air. Okay. It's been such a dream of an experience for me, man. So looking forward to the next two shifts tomorrow, Thanksgiving Day, 3 to 6 p.m. People say, Marc, you're working on Thanksgiving? I'm like, brother, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman work on Thanksgiving. If they can work on Thanksgiving, you think I can too, right? Friday, I'll be on with them 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. What an honor. So we will see you next week, my friend. All right?
Marc, you're the man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Take care, guys.
Great stuff from Marc Ryan. Guys, what a legendary conversation. That's going to do it for us. We have gotten way past 2 o'clock. I see Austin Gregory clamoring for the Rivalry Week mailbag, my friend. We got a lot to do to prepare for Thanksgiving. I'm jumping on multiple shows today. We simply don't have the time, so I do apologize for it. But, guys, we had to squeeze in Marc Ryan. We had to squeeze in the content. I appreciate you all tuning in, jumping on. Really good stuff. Guys, special guest convo with Clemson Tom will drop tomorrow. Convo with Jake Crane drops Friday. We're jumping on with our friends over at Nachos and Analysis later in the day as well. Going to be a lot of fun. And truly, guys, again, in case you missed it, I locked in my pick. 27-20, I've got Clemson winning the game. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. When we drop new video content as well. Also, guys, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. You can check us out at The Spurs Up Show there. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much for the love, the support. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. A happy Thanksgiving to you all. Go Cox. Beat Clemson. Enjoy rivalry weekend. And do not forget the post-game call-in show after the game. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. We will talk to you all on Saturday night.